What would you do if someone hit you in public, right in the middle of a busy street, with everyone watching? Would you hit back? Would you scream? Or would you do something so unexpected that it leaves the entire crowd speechless? This is the story of a man who faced that exact moment. But what he did next, it shocked everyone. Before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments because this story will leave you questioning what you would have done. Marcus never expected this day to change his life. He was just walking down the street, minding his own business. Dressed in a simple button-up shirt and jeans, he looked like any other hard-working man heading home after a long day. But behind his calm face was a lifetime of battles. He had dealt with racism before, people clutching their bags when he walked by, security guards watching him too closely in stores, strangers assuming the worst about him without even knowing his name. But he had always let it go. Today, however, would be different. Then there was Karen. Blonde, well-dressed, carrying a designer bag, she walked like the world belonged to her. To her, Marcus was not just a man walking by. He was someone who, in her mind, should not be there. The moment their paths crossed, something inside her snapped. The setting? A busy city plaza. People everywhere, some rushing to work, others sipping coffee, scrolling through their phones, lost in their own worlds. No one was paying attention, not yet. But in just a few seconds, all of that would change. Marcus and Karen had never met before, but in an instant, their lives were about to collide. And when they did, the entire street would come to a stop. Something was about to happen, something big, and no one was ready for it. It happened in a split second. Marcus was about to walk past Karen when, without warning, she turned sharply, her face twisted in anger. "Watch where you are going," she snapped. Marcus barely had time to react before, smack! The slap rang out louder than anyone expected. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The busy plaza, filled with the sounds of honking cars and people chatting, suddenly fell silent. A grown man had just been slapped in the face, and the worst part? He had done nothing wrong. Karen's hand was still in the air, shaking slightly, as if she herself could not believe what she had just done. But her expression was not one of regret. It was something else, something uglier. Marcus stood frozen. The sting on his cheek was nothing compared to the heat rising inside him. His mind raced. What just happened? Did she really hit me? His fists clenched, then relaxed. His heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at him to respond, to say something, to do something. But then he saw the way the crowd was looking at him. Not at her, at him. It was subtle, but it was there. The way some people took a step back. The way others whispered to each other. A few even reached for their phones, not to call for help, but to record. They were waiting, watching, expecting him to react, expecting him to lash out, to prove every stereotype right. Marcus swallowed hard. He knew this feeling too well. Karen took a step closer, her voice dripping with fake outrage. "You think you can just walk around like you own the place? People like you always—" She stopped, suddenly aware of the cameras pointed at her. A nervous glance at the bystanders, and just like that her whole demeanor changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth trembled, and her voice softened. He threatened me," she gasped. "I was scared. He came at me first." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had not moved an inch. He had not said a single word. And yet, in a matter of seconds, she had turned herself into the victim. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Marcus with suspicion. Others looked at Karen, uncertain. But no one spoke up. No one defended him. That was when Marcus realized it was happening again. It was not just about the slap anymore. It was about something bigger. And the scariest part? He knew exactly how this would end if he was not careful. He had seen it before, felt it before, lived it before. Karen's voice broke through his thoughts, louder now, gaining confidence. "Someone call the police. He's dangerous. Look at him. Look at how angry he is." Marcus closed his eyes for a brief second, forcing himself to breathe, because she was right about one thing. He was angry, but not for the reasons she thought. He was angry that this was even happening, that a slap, a lie, and a few whispers could be enough to put him in danger, that no matter how still he stood, no matter how calm he tried to be, the world still saw him as the threat, and that, more than anything else, terrified him. The crowd murmured, shifting uneasily. A few people stepped back. Others kept filming. One person, a young woman near the front, finally spoke up. "Wait, are you sure? I saw everything, and he didn't—" Karen whirled toward her, her voice sharp. "Are you calling me a liar?" Silence. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had to choose, right now. One wrong move, and this would spiral out of control. One wrong word, and this would not end here. The cameras were rolling. The crowd was waiting. And then it happened. A sound in the distance. Sirens. The police were on their way. Marcus's heart pounded as the blue and red lights flashed in the distance. Everything was about to change, but not in the way anyone expected. The sirens grew louder. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the buildings, painting the faces in the crowd with an eerie glow. The police were almost here. Marcus stood still, his mind racing. He had done nothing wrong. Nothing. But he knew that did not matter. Karen, now fully in character, clutched her chest like she had been attacked. Her voice wavered, tears forming in her eyes. He hit me," she sobbed. "I was so scared." The crowd shifted. Some looked at Marcus with doubt. Others looked at Karen, unsure. A few whispered among themselves. The tension was thick, so thick it felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. Then the first officer stepped out of the car. A tall, stern-looking cop. His eyes flicked between Karen's distressed face and Marcus's unreadable expression. His hand hovered near his holster. "Sir, step back," the officer ordered. His voice was firm, commanding. Marcus's stomach twisted. "Here we go." "I didn't do anything," he said. His voice steady but low. He knew better than to raise it. He knew better than to sound angry, even though he had every right to be. Karen pointed at him, her face full of mock fear. He grabbed me. I thought he was going to—" The young woman in the crowd, the one who had seen everything, suddenly stepped forward. "That's not true," she blurted out. Her voice was shaking, but she stood her ground. "I saw everything. He never touched her. She hit him." Karen's head snapped toward her, eyes burning with rage. "Excuse me, who even are you?" The young woman did not back down. Someone who saw what really happened. The officer hesitated. His gaze flicked between Marcus and Karen. For the first time, there was doubt in his expression. "Is that true?" he asked. More whispers. Some people nodded. A few others, still recording, murmured agreements. Karen's face turned pale. She had lost control of the story. Marcus could see the panic creeping into her eyes. But even now, even when the truth was unraveling, she still would not admit it. Karen stammered. "Maybe I overreacted, but I felt threatened. He looked aggressive." A bitter taste filled Marcus's mouth. There it was. The excuse. The unspoken rule that his existence alone was enough to be considered a threat. His fists tightened. But he forced himself to stay calm. He had seen this play out before. He knew how dangerous this moment was. The officer turned to Marcus. "Sir, do you want to press charges?" The crowd held its breath. Karen froze. Marcus could see it. The way her hands trembled, the way her breath hitched. She had expected to win. She had expected him to be the one in handcuffs. But now she was the one at risk. A part of him wanted to say yes, to let her feel the weight of consequences, to make her understand what it was like to be accused of something you did not do. But then he thought about it. Would she learn anything? Would she change? Or would she just twist the story in her favor again? The weight of the decision sat heavy on his chest. And then he made his choice. Marcus took a deep breath, looked Karen straight in the eye, and said, "No, I don't need to press charges." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's mouth fell open. Even the officer looked slightly surprised. Marcus saw it. The flicker of relief in Karen's expression. The brief moment where she thought she had won. But then he spoke again. "But," he continued, his voice calm, "I want her to apologize, right here, in front of everyone." Karen stiffened. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The crowd turned to her, watching, waiting. Silence stretched. Then finally, Karen swallowed. I'm sorry." The words sounded forced, unnatural, but they were out in the open now, and that was enough. Marcus gave her one last look, then turned and walked away. Not because he was weak, not because he was afraid, but because he refused to let her control the narrative any longer. The truth was out, and that was all the justice he needed. The moment should have ended there. Karen had apologized. The crowd had witnessed the truth. The police had stepped back. Marcus could have walked away, knowing he had handled it with dignity. But then a voice spoke up from the back of the crowd. "Wait, I know her." Heads turned. People moved aside, revealing a man in his late 40s, dressed in a gray suit. His face was serious, his eyes locked on Karen. Karen's expression changed instantly. Her confidence, the fake outrage, the entitled attitude, all of it vanished. She looked like she had seen a ghost. The man stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. "Karen Whitmore." He said her name like it was a curse. "You still pulling this same act?" Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some people looked at Karen, others at the man. Marcus watched her closely. Her face had gone pale, her hands clenched into fists. "I don't know you," she muttered, shaking her head. "You're mistaken." But the man did not stop. 2017, Denver, grocery store parking lot, he continued. "A black teenager was arrested because you said he was stealing your purse, a purse that was later found in your own car." Marcus's stomach twisted. The crowd gasped. Karen stumbled back. The man kept going. 2019, Chicago. You called the cops on a Hispanic delivery guy because you thought he looked suspicious. He lost his job. You never apologized." Karen's breathing grew faster. And then the final blow. 2021, Dallas. You accused a black father of lurking near a playground when he was just waiting for his daughter. The police came. He was almost arrested in front of his kid. Dead silence. Karen's eyes darted around. She could feel it now, the shift. The people around her were no longer unsure. They were no longer watching Marcus. They were watching her. Her face twisted with anger. "That's not true," she snapped. "These are lies. Why should anyone believe you?" The man pulled out his phone. "Because I'm a journalist, and I covered every single one of those cases." The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a few shouts. Phones were up. Cameras were rolling. Karen's worst nightmare was unfolding in front of her, and for the first time she had no control over the story. Marcus exhaled. This was bigger than just him. Karen had done this before. She had destroyed lives. And now she was finally being exposed. Karen's head shook violently. I was scared. I didn't mean—" The journalist cut her off. "Number, you weren't scared. You were weaponizing fear. And now the world knows exactly who you are." Marcus felt a strange sense of relief. For once, justice was happening in real time. And the best part? He had not even needed to say a word. Karen's voice cracked. "Please, I didn't mean to—" But no one was listening anymore. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Karen stood frozen. The weight of her past had finally caught up with her. She could see it in the eyes of the people around her, the realization, the disgust, the quiet judgment. This time, there was no escape. Marcus took a deep breath. He should have felt victorious. He should have felt satisfied. But he did not, because this was not just about her. This was about every moment in his life when he had been accused, judged, or made to feel like a threat. For nothing. This was about the thousands of others who had been in his position and had no one to stand up for them. The truth was out. The world had seen it. But was that enough? The journalist sighed. "Karen, this isn't just a mistake. This is a pattern that has ruined lives." Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Marcus looked at her carefully. Did she really believe that? Or was she just sorry she'd finally been caught? He could see it now, the fear in her eyes. But it was not fear of him. It was fear of consequences, and that was the difference between them. She had always had the power to walk away, to shift the blame, to manipulate the situation to her advantage. He never had that luxury. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "You don't get to cry your way out of this one," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You've done this too many times. You knew exactly what you were doing." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. People in the crowd were shaking their heads. Some were still filming. This would not be forgotten. The police officer who had arrived earlier stepped forward. "Ma'am, based on what we've heard, we'll need to take a formal statement. If these past incidents are real, there could be legal action." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "Please, this isn't fair." Marcus let out a small laugh. Not because he found it funny, but because of the irony. Fair was being slapped in public for no reason. Fair was being accused of things he never did. Fair was almost being arrested because of someone else's lies. Karen had lived in a world where she could make false accusations and walk away without consequences. Now, she would finally know what it felt like to be powerless. The officer turned to Marcus. "Sir, if you want to file a report, now would be the time." Marcus hesitated. Pressing charges could mean Karen would face real legal consequences, maybe even jail time. But was that what he wanted? Would punishing her change anything, or would it just make him another part of the cycle? He exhaled. "No," he said. "I don't need to file a report." Karen's shoulders dropped in relief. But before she could say anything, Marcus continued. "But she needs to own what she did. Not just today, all of it." The journalist nodded. "That's right. The world needs to hear it." Karen looked at the cameras around her, at the strangers waiting for her to speak. For once, she had no control over the narrative. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Say it like you mean it." Karen clenched her fists. "I am sorry," she repeated louder this time. For everything. The words hung in the air. Would she change? Marcus did not know. But this was not about her anymore. This was about showing the world that the truth always comes out, that character matters more than power, and that choosing dignity over anger is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do. He turned and walked away. He did not need revenge, because justice had already been served. The story spread fast. Within hours, videos of the incident were everywhere, on social media, on the news, in conversations around the country. People debated. Some defended Karen, saying she just made a mistake. Others pointed out the deeper issue. This was not a mistake. This was a pattern. For Marcus, the messages poured in. Some were from strangers who had been through similar things, thanking him for standing his ground. Others were from people who had never thought about these situations before, now seeing the world differently. And Karen, she tried to disappear. She shut down her accounts, stopped showing up to work, and stayed silent. But silence was not enough. For the first time in her life, she was truly held accountable. Would she ever really change? Maybe. Maybe not. But that did not matter. What mattered was the message this moment sent to the world. Racism thrives in silence. It ends when people speak up. And this time, the truth was louder than the lies. Marcus sat in his apartment later that night, scrolling through the comments, reading the headlines. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had been put in an unfair situation, again. But this time, he walked away with his head high, because for once, the world had seen what he had always known. This story was not just about Marcus. It was not just about Karen. It was about all the moments people like Marcus have faced, and all the times they had no one to speak up for them. Karen's lie could have ruined his life, but this time it did not. Because people did not stay silent. Because someone recorded the truth. Because one person in the crowd stood up and said, "That's not what happened." And that made all the difference. Now, here is the real question. How many other Karens are out there? How many times has this happened when no one was filming? When no journalist was around to expose the truth? This is not just a story. This is reality. So, what would you do if you were there? Would you speak up? Would you record? Would you let the truth be silenced? Drop a comment below. Have you ever seen something unfair happen and had to decide whether to step in or stay silent? What did you do? And if you believe the truth should always be louder than the lie, hit that like button, share this video, and make sure more people see this. Because the only way things change is when we refuse to look away. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters.